Let me say at the outset that on behalf of the Committee to Protect Journalists, as a member of that board, I want to welcome all of you, and I'd like all of you to just pause for a moment and think about the spirit in which we are here tonight. We're here not so much in the spirit of celebration, but rather in the acknowledgement that on this, the 20th anniversary of CPJ, our common profession is undergoing a historic test of its place, its worthiness, and its deportment in the new world that was formed by the Big Bang of September 11th. For all that we have been through in the past 10 weeks, the test is far from complete, as we know, at home and around the world. Moreover, as we have learned again so painfully in Afghanistan, the personal perils of this calling are profound. So before we proceed, I'd like to ask you to join me in a moment of silence for our colleagues who were murdered on the road to Kabul yesterday and our other colleagues who were killed last week as they accompanied the Northern Alliance. A moment of silence, please. These are somber times, and they are a reminder of why CPJ was formed 2 decades ago, to honor and assist those journalists who struggle in these conditions and much worse every day in places where the repercussions are a good deal more severe than the occasional critical comment from the Patriot Police. Nonetheless, this is also a time for quiet pride in the role of the press in all of its forms during one of society's greatest and most unexpected crises of modern times. As a profession, it seems to me that we can be at once so capable of self-flagellation and so incapable of accepting constructive criticism gracefully. That seems to be genetically encoded in us, and it is not likely to completely disappear. But tonight, I am going to ask you to join me in a toast to one of our colleagues and your competitors at the same time for the common effort of the last 2.5 months under exceptionally difficult circumstances. Since it is impossible to single out here all of the individual superior work, I am going to exercise personal privilege and single out one guest who I believe is in many ways emblematic. Thomas Franklin is a staff photographer for The Record in Bergen, New Jersey. He took the picture of the New York City firemen and the flag at Ground Zero, and he immediately forfeited all the rights. His paper made it widely available, asking only that other news agencies make a contribution to an appropriate charity. Through it all, Thomas neither sought nor accepted attention that celebrated his role for this stunning piece of work. So Thomas, I'd like you to stand. We raise a glass to you and to all of our colleagues as well. Now I am pleased to introduce the chair of the Committee to Protect Journalists, one of the true living legends of American journalism, Gene Roberts, who is godfather, in a matter of speaking, to so many of the best and brightest of those who worked under him at the New York Times and the Philadelphia Inquirer and admired him from afar. At CPJ, Gene is an indefatigable champion of our causes intellectually, financially, and personally. He has been a powerful force in raising the kinds of bucks that we need to keep this important work going. Moreover, he has been a spiritual guiding light, and I know that you'll find this hard to believe, but as a result of an accident over the weekend. He now walks even more slowly than he talks. Ladies and gentlemen, Gene Roberts.
Thank you. I have good news. We have once again broken our record and raised $1,185,000 from this dinner. This is $150,000 more than any previous dinner. Our deepest gratitude goes to our dinner chairman, Bob Pittman, for taking us to new heights. And we thank him doubly, along with the Pittman Family Foundation, for giving $250,000 to ensure the dinner's success. It could not come at a more critical time. Bob, your generosity and the generosity of everyone here tonight will help us cope with the new pressures brought upon journalists and repressive nations in the wake of the events of September 11. All of the dinner's proceeds and much more will be needed in the months ahead. This seems an appropriate time to announce that to help us cope with the new burdens, CPJ now has 2 honorary chairmen, 2 journalists whose very names are synonymous with the CPJ mission of fighting for the rights of journalists to report freely around the world. One is, of course, Walter Cronkite, who has been our honorary chairman and our inspiration since our beginning 20 years ago. Now joining him as honorary co-chairman is Terry Anderson. No one knows better than Terry what CPJ is all about. He stood up for press freedom in his bleak years in captivity. He's still standing up, and he's determined to do still more in the years ahead. Walter, Terry, will you please stand as we salute you? Now it is my honor to introduce our next speaker, a man who has reported from the front lines of nearly every major story since the Civil Rights Movement and the war in Vietnam. Dan Rather has been a member of the CPJ board since its earliest years. He has always been there for us in every crisis and need. We are deeply grateful to him. Dan?
Thank you very much, Gene Roberts. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to begin with a request that we pause for a moment of silence to remember the dead, wounded, and missing from the events of September 11th and their families, and also to think of our sons and daughters, our brothers and sisters in the military overseas tonight. Another moment of silence, please. And now, thanks to all of you for this opportunity to add my voice to all of you, helping the Committee to Protect Journalists to celebrate its 20th anniversary. The CPJ has now been doing its good work for 2 decades. Its efforts to defend journalists' freedom to cover the story, whatever and wherever the story may be. These efforts have had a real and positive impact on our craft. Those of us who are members of the committee thank all of you for taking a night out of your lives to be here this evening to mark CPJ's 20 years of fighting the good fight. I also think it's important that we are all here at this particular night because right now the CPJ's mission is more relevant than ever. The world's press corps faces the challenge of covering a new kind of war, one shrouded in secrecy and being fought for the moment in one of the most dangerous places on the planet. And though this latest outbreak of war in Afghanistan is not yet 2 months old, I want to underscore what Tom Brokaw said to begin, that we have already seen tragic evidence of the grave risk it poses to the men and women who cover it. The 7 journalists who've been killed so far are very much in our minds and in our hearts throughout this evening. Afghanistan certainly is not the only focus of concern. Journalists put themselves in harm's way every day in trouble spots around the globe to bring people the news. And as we've seen, journalists have increasingly become targets themselves. And long ago, those 20 years ago, when Michael Massing, Laurie Nadell, and a few others started this organization, and I remember very well when they came and said, if we don't raise $200 by the end of the week, we're going to be out because we can't pay the rent. The debt owed to them for recognizing the growing danger to journalists around the world and for putting together what was then, one can only describe, a ragtag organization to deal with it and to see it grow to what it has now become is, in a word, breathtaking. In these 20 years, the CPJ has stood as the foremost international voice raised in protection of journalists everywhere. So it is a great privilege for me to announce tonight that the efforts of the CPJ have been recognized with its largest grant award ever, a wonderful gift of $3.1 million from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. Of that sum, $600,000 is designated for general operating support, while a very generous $2.5 million will go to establish an endowment fund for CPJ. This represents an unprecedented show of support, not to mention a tremendous vote of confidence in CPJ's unwavering fight for press freedom worldwide. And let me echo what Gene Roberts and everyone up and down the line in the committee feels so strongly, that we will deliver value for dollar for those who've been so much in support of CPJ. In its 20th anniversary year, this grant helps give CPJ a more confident future. As we look to the future, though, I would also like to conclude by taking a look back to remember 2 very special women, both CPJ board members, who passed away this year, Katharine Graham and Judith Moses. About Katharine Graham, who was, of course, a rightful journalistic legend for her leadership of the Washington Post, I think my friend Lou Bacardi of the Associated Press said it best. Quote, she was a hero for the way she met the challenge in taking over the Post company, for what she did with it, for what she stood for in journalism, and for the inspiration she provided other women, unquote. To that I would add, also for men, including this one. Katharine Graham had guts, and she had a passion for journalism as big as a locomotive's heart. We miss her, and we always will. Judith Moses was also a woman of great courage, a defining characteristic that is evident in the unflinching way this woman approached dangerous and demanding assignments time after time after time, and in her long-standing, staunch commitment to CPJ. Judith was more than a journalist. She was also an educator, teaching the ethics and practice of journalism throughout West Africa. In this, too, she stood up for what she believed, even in the face of attempts by various local governments there to shut her classes down. The CPJ is richer for its association with the lives of these remarkable women, and I hope you will take a moment to read the memorial texts on Katharine Graham and Judith Moses in your program. Thank you very much.
I want to introduce to you now the chair of tonight's dinner. It's a great pleasure for me. I'm particularly pleased to introduce our dinner chair, a son of Mississippi who left that state before finishing college to become one of America's radio whiz kids, changing the face of radio programming from the Deep South to the Midwest to New York City, where he hired and then fired Don Imus and managed to survive both experiences so far as we know. Although I have it on good authority, there remains a contract out on his life until Time, Warner, and AOL increased their contribution to a ranch just west of Santa Fe. Bob is, I will tell you personally, a modest man who manages to take on big assignments and succeed with style, imagination, and a keen eye for the taste and the appetites of America. Literally, a keen eye. He lost the sight in one of his eyes in a boyhood horse riding accident, which prompts one of my daughters, when I tell her that I am going helicopter riding with Bob and that he is a very good pilot, prompts my daughter to quickly add, "Yes, Dad, I know he's your friend and he is a very good one-eyed helicopter pilot." He was, as you know, one of the founders of MTV. He was a theme park genius for Time Warner before its present incarnation. After a brief detour to Sundance, he joined AOL at the invitation of Steve Case and now sits at the top of that great empire, presiding over some of the most prestigious news publications and news agencies in the world. As his friend, I have known for some time of his interest in and voracious appetite for news and information. As a result, I was not surprised when he made the renewal of CNN's franchise a top priority on his watch, a renewal based on the dissemination of serious news, analysis, and commentary. We are especially grateful for his presence here tonight, a gratitude that would have been almost as complete had he not personally contributed $250,000 to our cause. I do think it deserves a round of applause. For that kind of money, Mr. Pittman, I want you to know that I left out your relationship with Mort Downey in my introduction.
Rare I find Tom in a factual error, but I actually fired Don Imus and then rehired him. I learned. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks to Gene Roberts and the other members of the board, as well as to our award winners and other distinguished guests tonight. Most of all, though, thanks to the Committee to Protect Journalists for its ever more important work in defending journalists and promoting freedom of the press around the world. This is a cause that we care deeply about, and I'm very happy and honored to be here tonight. The terrorist attacks on September 11th have certainly transformed our lives forever. Not only did it show us the worst of humanity, but it also, fortunately, showed us the best of humanity, including the heroism, compassion, and generosity of people here in New York City and indeed around the world. Among the good that's come from this tragedy is an increasing awareness of the CPJ's important mission and why its success is so vital. The nightmare of September 11th, the anthrax attacks, and last week's airliner crash here, as well as this new kind of war overseas, all underscore that the public's need for clear, accurate, and timely information has never been more critical. We all now have an even greater appreciation of the need to protect the voices of truth and the free flow of information everywhere. Unfortunately, we've also learned firsthand how dangerous that job is with the tragic deaths of journalists in Afghanistan. We both honor them and grieve for them and their families and friends. It couldn't be clearer that the values of independent journalism, for which the CPJ fights, are imperative to preserving our very way of life and providing hope for a democratic process and a vital civil society around the world. Tonight's International Press Freedom Award winners are living examples of the CPJ's mission with their heroic efforts in the face of daunting challenges. They come from all around the world, China, Zimbabwe, Argentina, and the West Bank. But they are united in their common commitment to reporting the truth, no matter what. You are an inspiration to us all, and we're indebted to you for your sacrifices. In closing, I want to congratulate all of our honorees and again express my own and AOL Time Warner's appreciation to the CPJ for its important work on this 20th year of its founding. Thank you.
Keeping with our practice of the past couple of years, we're going to share with you now a video of the honorees that we honor here tonight, and also within that, we'll hear from Walter Cronkite as well about the important work of the Committee to Protect Journalists.
During the Vietnam War, I led an effort to try to locate some of the dozens of journalists who were missing in action.
It was some 30 years ago when Walter Cronkite first intervened to help his fellow news professionals. It was 20 years ago when the most trusted man in America joined the founders of the Committee to Protect Journalists.
In 1981, a group of journalists wrote asking me to head up a new organization dedicated to protecting journalists. There was no such organization in existence at the time. I became the honorary chairman of what would become the Committee to Protect Journalists. It's a decision I'm still proud of 20 years later.
In Vietnam, we were accredited with military units. You went out with a Marine battalion, they'd take care of you.
It was in the years just before the committee's birth, says CPJ founding board member Peter Arnett, that the world began to change for working journalists. Peter noticed it in Cambodia.
The journalists were on their own. They did not have the protection of host governments. Often these governments could not protect them. 20 American journalists, or those working for American organizations, disappeared. We're still looking for many of them.
I arrived in Beirut in June of 1982, and I can remember at that time the amazing ability of journalists to go just about anywhere. It was dangerous, of course, but you weren't a target as a journalist.
Longtime CPJ board member and newly named honorary co-chair Terry Anderson remembers the change not as a withdrawal of benevolence, but as the onset of malevolence.
It became, in those years, much more dangerous simply to be a journalist, no matter where you were. And certainly during the Yugoslav wars and in other places over the past 20 years, being a journalist has made you more of a target in yourself, no matter what you're doing.
We are still here in our prisons.
When Terry Anderson became a target and was held hostage by terrorists in Lebanon, he discovered he had few resources, but among them were his news colleagues at the Committee to Protect Journalists.
Over the course of the last 20 years, I've seen the committee grow from 3 volunteers to a staff of 25. Today, wherever journalists are being threatened, attacked, or imprisoned, CPJ is there writing letters, raising awareness, making a difference, and helping keep the flow of information open, which is, of course, key to any democratic society. This year alone, there were missions to almost a dozen countries, including Russia, Colombia, Burma, Syria, Ethiopia.
Terry Anderson, who for the past 10 years has traveled the world for CPJ, has seen the difference the committee can make.
I spent 7 years in prison. The opportunity to help free people from prison who don't belong there means a lot to me. It's very important to me. And the CPJ really does that.
On September 11th, the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon placed dramatic new burdens on America's journalists. Both the immediacy of live coverage and the continuity of round-the-clock coverage helped keep America united during the crisis. Now it is CPJ which has gone on high alert.
We're working on all kinds of fronts, monitoring the situation in Pakistan, where there are hundreds of journalists, some of whom have come under attack, monitoring the situation for journalists in Afghanistan. We're very vigorously protesting any attacks on journalists, urging them to stay in touch with us so that we know what's going on, and if they need our help, if they need our support, If they need advocacy on their behalf, we want to be there ready to help them in any way that we can.
20 years after its founding, the Committee to Protect Journalists is busier than ever.
I've seen the impact and relevance of the CPJ grow over these past 20 years. I believe that now more than ever, the committee has a vital role to play in helping journalists around the world do their jobs. People around the world are hungry for information, and CPJ is making sure that journalists can continue to meet this critical need.
Our thanks to ABC and one of the founding members of CPJ, David Marish, for that video this evening. Now I want to introduce to you one of the heroic figures of our organization. She works not just out of a cramped 12th floor space on 7th Avenue here in New York, but off her cell phone and email 24/7. She is extraordinarily dedicated to this cause, personally and professionally, and I count it a great privilege to have her in our midst, and as my friend, the Executive Director of the Committee to Protect Journalists, Ann Cooper, ladies and gentlemen.
Yesterday, we had 4 sorrowful reminders of how dangerous this profession can be. 4 journalists ambushed and executed in Afghanistan. 7 journalists have now died covering this conflict, 7 from a very global press corps that's working to keep the world informed. The journalists killed came from Germany, from France, Spain, Italy, Australia, and from Afghanistan itself. It is too late to save them, but it's not too late to demand justice for those who carried out yesterday's crimes on the road to Kabul. And it is not too late to help the hundreds of other journalists at risk just for doing their jobs all over the world. We can help them by identifying those countries and those political leaders who repress their media, and by then exposing that repression wherever it occurs. We're often asked, does CPJ's advocacy work? The answer is absolutely. In 1996, CPJ counted 185 journalists imprisoned for their work. Over the past 5 years, with intensive advocacy by CPJ and other organizations, that statistic fell by more than half to 81. Here's another welcome figure. CPJ traditionally honors an imprisoned journalist at this dinner every year and then campaigns intensively for that journalist's freedom. Every single journalist we have honored has been freed. 2 were released just this year, before serving out their full terms and after CPJ's campaigning. 1999 award winner Jesus Joel Diaz Hernandez was released from his Cuban prison in January. He's back at work, back irritating the Cuban authorities with his independent reporting. And in September, Iranian authorities ordered the early release of Mashallah Shamsulvizin, whom we honored last year. Shamsulvizin is a highly respected editor whose 4 newspapers remain banned in Iran. Shamsulvizin was unable to join us here in New York tonight, but he has sent us this video message from Tehran. Let's listen to Mashallah Shamsulvizin.
به نام خدا من ماشاءالله
I wish to extend my deepest appreciation to the Committee to Protect Journalists for its efforts to defend freedom of expression and the press around the world, as well as the rights of independent journalists everywhere. I would like to take this opportunity to express my disappointment in regards to recent closings of certain publications in Iran. I apologize for not being among my colleagues at the banquet tonight in New York. Although I am not there, the mission and message of CPJ is very much with independent-minded journalists in Iran. One day we will join the community of free journalists around the world and together strive towards the free flow of information. I extend my warmest wishes to my colleagues the world over and thank all of you very much.
Our first presenter tonight has one of the most illustrious names in American journalism as a result of her own work. As Beijing bureau chief and now State Department correspondent for CNN, ladies and gentlemen, Andrea Koppel.
Good evening. Like so many other foreign correspondents who've lived and worked in China, I too have any number of stories that I could tell you of various run-ins with the Chinese government. There was the one time, in fact, that I was racing through back alleys of Beijing trying to get away from the police because I had filmed on Tiananmen Square. There was another time that I was detained by Chinese police in northeastern China because I had interviewed a former state worker, unemployed state worker, who was literally rotting in his bed. But I always felt confident and secure that the worst thing that could happen to me is that I would be expelled from China because I have an American passport. The same cannot be said for Jiang Weiping. There are countries in this world where journalists who investigate and expose corruption at high levels of power get respect in return for good reporting. This is not the case in China, and this was not the case for CPJ's International Press Freedom Awardee, Jiang Weiping. When Jiang wrote a series of articles last year alleging corruption among a number of government officials in the northeastern part of China, instead of respect, he got a prison sentence. Jiang was thrown in jail in December, charged with revealing state secrets, instigating to overthrow state power, and illegally holding confidential documents. In September, after being held for 9 months, he was secretly tried. Jiang was sentenced to 9 years in prison.
The Chinese public is hungry for real news, but journalists who deliver the goods get mixed messages from the Communist Party, reports CPJ's Asia specialist Kavita Menon.
China jails more journalists than any country in the world, and while the figure is constantly fluctuating, there are at least 25 journalists currently imprisoned, according to CPJ's records.
While on the other,
there's some very interesting journalism coming out of China. There are some newspapers that have developed quite a reputation for doing some investigative reports and lengthy feature stories about social issues.
there are even elements of the government and Communist Party who support this kind of journalism.
Some leaders think that it really would be beneficial for society and even for the Communist Party to have journalists root out corruption, expose these abuses so that the party can kind of clean house.
In this atmosphere, veteran investigative reporter Jiang Weiping thought he could just do his job.
I believe that Jiang is innocent.
This friend of Jiang's asked that we interview him in shadow. He is a fellow journalist.
History is a good judge, and he can tell that Jiang is just a journalist. He's just a good father and good husband, and he doesn't mean to attack the government. He just he's just do his job.
Unfortunately for Jiang, one of his stories for the Hong Kong magazine Frontline revealed that a well-connected politician named Bo Xilai had covered up corruption among his friends and family.
Whereas Jiang Weiping is currently imprisoned, Bo Xilai has actually been promoted, and he's now the governor of Liaoning province.
The international community and all the journalists must cry out for this. Otherwise, you or your friend or me might be the second Jiang Weiping.
Receiving special recognition with a 2001 International Press Freedom Award is the imprisoned investigative reporter, Jiang Weiping.
I am honored to accept this award tonight on behalf of Jiang Weiping, who obviously can't be with us this evening. As Jiang's friend says, we in the international community must do something about Jiang's imprisonment. please take a moment to find your advocacy cards. They're inside this program. They're also inside the Dangerous Missions catalog there. And it's about 3 pages in. It looks like a postcard. So please take a moment to sign this card with the gold pens. They're actually in a gold box. I don't know if they're gold pens, but they're donated to CPJ by LexisNexis. And then place your signed cards, can't have anything without a plug, in the silver dish that's in the center of your tables. If you're like me and you procrastinate, it's probably good to do it right now so you don't forget. CPJ has found out over the years that these advocacy cards can and do work. They actually help get journalists out of jail. Thank you for your help.
If I may direct your attention now as you find the postcards and sign them, we hope that you will do that. If not, immediately we want to proceed with the award ceremonies. To the far end of the stage, I'm pleased to introduce Carol Guzzi from the Washington Post, a photographer who will introduce our next honoree. Carol?
Thank you. Thank you. As we've seen as recently as yesterday in Afghanistan, the risks facing journalists can at times be great, requiring great courage just to do their job. My deepest sympathy for our colleagues and their families. It's been said that if your pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough. Covering a story with a camera can be somewhat different than covering a story with a pen at times. To make compelling images of what's happening, photojournalists may be required to put themselves literally in the middle of the action, even at risk to his or her own personal safety. This is a familiar concept to the next International Press Freedom awardee, Reuters cameraman Mazen Dana. Mazen mainly covers one story, the story of his hometown, Hebron, on the West Bank. Despite beatings and unending dangers, his dedication to the story is undeterred. And as you'll see, to get a good picture of what's happening in Hebron, Mazen frequently finds himself in the middle of the action and in harm's way. We recognize him for documenting world events with a visual voice as eloquent as any words, and for his example of bravery and fortitude in the face of fire.
Mazen Dana works one of the most dangerous news beats in the world.
Hebron is a city in the West Bank, which is a cauldron for political tensions in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It's a city where about 400 Jewish settlers live in the center of town, surrounded by some 120,000 Palestinians. It really is a tinderbox for political tension. And it's journalists like Mazen Dana who are the people conveying those images of what's going on in Hebron.
The situation of cameraman in Hebron really is very tough and dangerous. Since I'm working in Hebron about 14 years as a cameraman and journalist, I injured uncounted time and arrested many times. The type of injuries that I got: 3 times live ammunition, about 70 to 80 times rubber bullets, about 100 times beating from soldiers and settlers.
Time after time, Dana has found himself and his camera caught in the midst of angry civilians and forceful Israeli soldiers or police.
Journalists have been harassed and roughed up by Palestinian Authority forces as well.
So we are neutral and we are filming what's going on. This is not satisfy the people or the soldiers what we are doing.
Mazen Dana is a newsman on a double mission: to represent the truth of what passes before his camera lens and to present a message of forbearance to government forces he encounters.
To stop harassing the journalists, to be neutral with all journalists, not to have a discrimination between Israeli and Palestinian and foreigner journalists. All of us the same. We have the same message. we're carrying it, we're filming, and we show the world what's going on.
The Committee to Protect Journalists is proud to award a 2001 International Press Freedom Award to Mazen Dana of the Reuters News Service.
Those pictures certainly need no further words. It's with great respect that I present this award to Mazen Dana.
سيداتي سادتي زملائي، أنا سعيد أن أكون هنا وفخور بالحصول على جائزة شرف الصحافة من قبل لجنة حماية الصحفيين. هذه نتيجة عمل متواصل من الجهد والعرق منذ 14 عاما.
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, I'm happy to be here and proud to receive this prestigious award from the Committee to Protect Journalists. It is the result of 14 years of continuous sweat and toil.
قوتي تأتي من دعم ومساندة الزملاء في الدفاع عن الحقيقة وضد الذين يريدون إخمادها.
It gives me strength to know that our colleagues around the world are supporting us in the quest for truth against those who seek to stifle it.
العمل في مدينة الخليل المقسمة تمارس بها الانتهاكات المتكررة يوميا من قبل الجيش الإسرائيلي والمستوطنين الرابضين في وسطها.
Working in the divided city of Hebron, attacks on press freedom take place daily at the hands of the Israeli army and the settlers who live in the center of town.
أن تكون صحفي في هذه المدينة فاقدة الأمل والمقسمة مثل الخليل تتطلب مزيدا من التضحية والجهد.
To be a journalist and cameraman in a city of lost hope like Hebron requires great sacrifices.
مثل إطلاق النار، الإهانة، الضرب، الحجارة وكسر المعدات الصحفية هي فقط بعض هذه المضايقات بالإضافة إلى حرية الحركة.
Gunfire, humiliation, beatings, prison, rocks, and the destruction of journalist equipment are just some of the hardships. And there's also the inability to move freely.
والشيء المؤسف أنني أستطيع أن أسافر إلى كافة أنحاء العالم ولا أستطيع الذهاب إلى مكتب رويترز بالقدس والذي يبعد عن مدينة الخليل فقط 25 كيلومترا.
The sad thing is that I can travel anywhere in the world, but I'm unable to travel to the Reuters Bureau in Jerusalem, which is just 25 kilometers away from Hebron.
هنا أنا بينكم وتركت خلفي زملائي الذين أفخر بهم والذين لا يقلون عني شجاعة. كلهم شجعان ويستحقون هذه الجائزة، وخصوصا زميلي نائل الشيوخي الذي يعمل معي منذ 8 أعوام.
Being here, I leave behind my colleagues of whom I'm very proud and who are no less courageous and deserving of this award, especially my close Reuters colleague Nael Shilchi, who has worked by my side for 8 years.
الكلمة أمانة والصورة حق، ولذلك سأستمر في عملي بالرغم من جميع المصاعب حتى لو كلفني حياتي.
Words and images are a public trust, and for this reason I will continue with my work regardless of the hardships, and even if it costs me my life.
بالأمس وقعت مأساة ل4 زملاء لنا في أفغانستان قتلوا من أجل إظهار الحق، وهي تبرهن على أن الحقيقة مهرها غالي ومرارتها تذوب في ظل استمرار حمل الزملاء لمشاعلها. دعمكم لنا في خط المواجهة يعطينا الأمل.
Yesterday, a tragedy befell 4 of our colleagues in Afghanistan. This tragedy illustrates just how costly uncovering the truth can be. The bitterness of this event is only alleviated by the knowledge that journalists around the world continue to strive for the truth, and your support for us on the front lines gives us hope.
وأخيرا أود أن أشكر زملائي في وكالة رويترز
الذين أعطونا المساندة الكاملة في الأوقات الصعبة، وأخص بالذكر رودني بندر، ستيف ويندي، بول هولمز، فيكتور أنتوني، وتومي كوكر، وكافة الزملاء في رويترز.
In closing, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to Reuters for its unwavering support through difficult times and for making me a better cameraman. I would especially like to thank Rodney Pinder, Steve Windy, Paul Holmes, Victor Anthony, and Tom Kirkwood, among others.
Finally, I thank CPJ for their effort to protect the journalists, and especially my colleague, Joe Campanion, for his effort and always he calling us all the time. Thank you.
One of the missions of CPJ in the next year or so is to expand our reach across this country. We are particularly pleased to have as a member of the board Alberto Ibirguan, who is the publisher of the Miami Herald and one of our most esteemed board members. He is here now to present our next award.
The next journalist we honor tonight is Horacio Verbitsky of Argentina, a distinguished columnist and advocate of press freedom. His investigative journalism has provided critical leadership and direction to the anti-corruption forces in his country and in the region. Horacio has stood the test of time, exposing wrongdoing in military as well as civilian governments. Against the military, he rose in defense of human rights. During the governments of Alfonsín and Menem, he exposed corruption in his columns and books. Verbitsky has enjoyed success in efforts to liberalize press laws in Argentina, and he continues to lead the fight to decriminalize libel laws supported by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, CPJ, and others. He is a man who has been proven right over and again, having had both the tenacity to get the story in the first place and the capacity to withstand the heat after publication.
The investigative reporter, columnist, professional activist Horacio Verbitsky is almost a one-man history of press freedom in Argentina.
After the ending of the dictatorship in 1983, the Argentine press started a real fight to conquer these rights stated in our Constitution. It started to investigate, firstly, the human rights abuses during the dictatorship.
Among this first wave was Horacio Verbitsky and his award-winning book, The Flight.
This book, The Flight, so profoundly shocked Argentine society because it was the first time someone directly admitted to having committed atrocities during the military dictatorship.
CPJ Latin America specialist Mary Len Smeet says Verbitsky exposed the crimes of the past and attacked corruption in the government of President Carlos Menem, even though that meant threats, lawsuits, and government discrimination.
Menem withdrew government publicity from the paper that Horacio was working for, but only for a few weeks, because then protests in Argentine society were so huge that it was just untenable to punish the paper this way.
Looking back at decades of conflict with oppressive political power, Horacio Verbitsky asserts he and the free press are winning.
All over Latin America, the press has been very helpful to investigate corruption and to build a more sane democracy on more sound foundations. Working as a journalist in Latin America is risky but funny. And in Argentina, at least, never boring.
The Committee to Protect Journalists is proud to present a 2001 International Press Freedom Award to Horacio Verbitsky of Argentina.
We are... Te dejo hablar.
Thank you, thank you. Dear friends, I would like to share this award with the 100 journalists that were kidnapped, tortured, and killed under Argentina's state-led terror. 30,000 people were then disappeared. This unacceptable outrage against human dignity is an indelible stain in our history. The CPJ helped us then to bring the suffering of the Argentine people to the attention of the world. Since the times in which our colleague Jacobo Timerman was kidnapped by the dictatorship and his newspaper La Opinión was seized and run by a general of the army. And CPJ is helping us again now to get rid of antiquated criminal defamation laws which threaten freedom of expression in less direct ways. Last year, CPJ and our organization, Periodistas, that means journalists, summoned a seminar in Buenos Aires to push for the passing of a legislation that will protect journalists against criminal defamation trials all over the region. And now in Argentina, we are waiting that our president, Fernando de la Rúa, will send to Congress, as he has promised to do, a bill that we drafted that will incorporate to our legislation the standard of actual malice as stated by the U.S. Supreme Court in 1964, and that you must know better than I know. Let me give you the candid view of a foreign journalist about recent developments in the U.S. After the appalling September 11 terrorist attacks, the United States may be tempted to erode its high standards on free expression, to restrict its own liberties, and to ignore the suffering of other people. We read in the American press that due process is at stake, and even the possible use of torture is being debated. We hear your president talk of being either, quote, for us or against us, quote. And worst of all, we see the huge popularity of this approach. In this context, I believe that the Argentine experience can be useful in spite of our obvious different political cultures and history. In our country, we learned that sacrificing civil liberties and human rights standards in the name of security has devastating effects. That under every circumstance, the civilized values cannot be protected by any means. That our commitment as journalists must be to the truth, not to any government. That fights between absolute good and evil, as theology teaches us, led to apocalypse. Once more, many, many thanks for this kind tribute.
Our next presenter is one of the strong professional voices in American journalism and one of the most personally appealing people that I know. From Chicago, CPJ board member Clarence Page. Clarence?
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, CPJ. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here tonight. I want to thank CPJ for giving me the honor and the privilege of allowing me to be a board member. And this past summer, accompanying Eve Sorakobi and Joel Simon from the CPJ staff to Southern Africa. My first visit to South Africa and Zimbabwe in 25 years when I was a young reporter there, back when Zimbabwe was still Rhodesia. How dismaying it was for me to find that the same repressive press laws that have been used against the resistance by the old regime in the 70s were now being used by the Robert Mugabe regime against his own people. In the midst of that, the gentleman we're honoring tonight has been publishing the only independent daily in the country against tremendous odds. Please indulge me as I quote from yesterday's Washington Post column by Fred Hyatt. On April 22nd last year, a bomb exploded in a curio shop in Harare, the capital of Zimbabwe in southern Africa. The apparent target was Jeff Nyarota, editor of the only daily newspaper in the country not controlled by the government of strongman Robert Mugabe. Nyarota, fortunately, was not in his office just above the store, but 9 months later, the evildoers, as President Bush might call them, struck again, bombing and destroying the Daily News printing press. Nyarota's newspaper nonetheless did not miss a day of publication, also has been threatened and jailed, most recently 2 weeks ago, as Mugabe has become even more paranoid and repressive. Mr. Hyatt finishes by saying, sunshine and the rule of law are anathema to criminals and tyrants. Jeff Nyarota, bravely battling an African autocrat, isn't just right and courageous. He's on our side. We should be by his. Having met Mr. Nyarota and his courageous staff, I can say that they make me proud to be a journalist.
It is not easy to work as a journalist in Zimbabwe, because when you work for the independent press, you are regarded and in some cases treated as an enemy of the peoples.
Jeff Nyarota edits Zimbabwe's Daily News. The paper's independence has brought it both criticism and increased circulation.
The Daily News is the only major source of alternative information. And it is for that reason that it has become quite a popular newspaper.
The paper's success has come at a cost. Twice in the last 2.5 years, the Daily News has been the target of bomb attacks, the most recent this past January 28th.
The explosion totally wrecked our printing press. It was wrecked beyond repair. Obviously, the intention of the perpetrators was to force the Daily News out of circulation. Fortunately, we have not missed a single issue since then.
It's been very much confirmed by independent sources that the bomb explosion was performed by military and anti-tank mines. Some independent sources are saying that it was done by the Zimbabwean military.
As the political situation worsens, the free press in Zimbabwe loses some.
I was arrested first in the middle of the night, and then the following day, the assistant editor and the news editor and a senior reporter on the Daily News were also arrested. They couldn't make the charges stick, and we were released.
And keeps going, thanks to Jeff Nyarota.
He's not only just an editor, he's also a great defender of human rights. And he has never let go of what he thought his mission was, to tell truth to power.
The Committee to Protect Journalists is proud to award a 2001 International Press Freedom Award to Jeff Nyarota of the Daily News of Harare, Zimbabwe.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Nyarota.